interest rate. Yes, welcome to DC Economics. So today I'm going to take you on introductory part about macroeconomics. So we are going to begin by looking at the brief history about macroeconomics. The severe economic contraction and the high unemployment of the 1930s, the decade of the Great Depression, spurred a great deal of thinking about macroeconomics issues, especially unemployment. Before the Great Depression, economists applied macroeconomic models, sometimes referred to as classical or market-creating models, to the economy-wide problems. For example, at the time of classical supply and demand analysis assumed that an excess supply of labor would drive down wage to a new equilibrium level as the result of unemployment would not persist. So most of the key ideas of classical was different from what was developed for the new ideas of macroeconomics. In other words, classical economists believed that recessions were self-correcting as output falls and demand for labor shifted to the left. So the argument went the wage rate will decline, thereby rising quantity of labor demanded by the firms that will want to hire more workers at the new lower wage rate. However, during the Great Depression, unemployment levels remained very high for nearly 10 years. In large measure, the failure of simple classical model to explain the prolonged existence of high unemployment provided the impetus or the emergence of the lines for development of macroeconomics. It is not surprising that we can now call macroeconomics was born 1930s. So the failure of the classical models developed out, giving influence for the development of new ideas of macroeconomics. And most of the ideas comes from the John Maynard Keynes. One of the most important works in the history of economics is the work that was done by John Maynard Keynes in the General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, published in 1936. Building on what was already understood about markets and their behavior, Keynes set out the constructed theory that would explain the confusing economic event of his time. Much of the macroeconomics as roots in the Keynes way. So Keynes contributed at large on development of new ideas of macroeconomics. He believed that actually the issue of unemployment was due to lack of aggregate demand, and the government should intervene so as to stabilize the economy. According to Keynes, it is not the price and the wage that determine the level of employment, as classical model suggested. Instead, it is the level of aggregate demand for goods and services. Keynes believed that the government should intervene in the economy and affect the level of output and employment. This was the different idea from classical. Classical assumed that in the long run, price is flexible and aggregate supply affects the output level. Different from Keynes, believed that in the short run, price is fixed and the average demand determines the national output. For that case, after the World War II, and especially in 1950s, Keynes' views began to gain influence over the both professional economists and government policy makers. Government came to believe that they could intervene in the economies to attain specific employment and output goals. So Keynes' work started to get inserted in the mind of many people. And actually, some of the economists support the works of Keynes by believing that the solution for the effects brought by Great Depression was the government to intervene through its policies So they began to use their powers to tax and spend, as well as their ability to affect interest rate and money supply for explicit purpose for controlling the economy ups and down. So the view of government policy becomes firmly established in the United States with the passage of the Employment Act of 1946. So this act established the president, the Council of Economic Advisors, a group of economists who advise the president on economic issues. So the act also committed the federal government to intervene in the economy to prevent large decline in output and employment. So the notion that the government could and should act to stabilize the economy reached the age of popularity in the 1960s. So this act established the President Council and economic advisors. They start to apply to reinforce to make sure that the policies are applied to make sure we stabilize the economy, to rescue the economy from the effects of Great Depression. During these years, Walter Harrah, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and both President Kennedy and President Johnson alluded to fine-tune as the government ruled the great inflation and unemployment. During the 1960s, many economists believed that the government could use the tools available to manipulate unemployment and inflation levels fairly precisely. So in 1970s and the early 1980s, the US economy had wide fluctuation in employment, output, and inflation. And in 1970 and up to 1975, and again 1980 up to 1982, the United States experienced a severe recession, although not catastrophic as the Great Depression of that past year 1930s. So these two recessions left millions without jobs and resulted in billions of dollars of lost output and income. So in 1974 up to 1975 and again 1979 up to 1981, the United States also saw very high rates of inflation. So the 1970s was at a period of stagnation and high inflation, which come to be called general as stagflation. So at this year, 1970, we observe the United States in a period of stagnation and high inflation, which come to be called general as stagflation. You may ask yourself, what is stagflation? So, in simple terms, when you speak about stagflation, this is defined as a situation in which there is high inflation. At the same time, there is low or negative output growth, and as well as high unemployment. So you can observe in the economy, the three effects consecutively happen. You find that is the high output growth, negative output growth, high unemployment, and inflation. Until the 1970s, high inflation had been observed only in the periods when the economy was prospered and unemployment was low. So for that case, due to this is stagnant inflation, that the periods of negative output growth, the problem of stagnant inflation was vexing both for macroeconomic theorists and policymakers concerned with the health of an economy. So it was very controversial in the economy of the country at that time. So macroeconomics is a part of our everyday life. So if macroeconomy is doing well, jobs are easy to find, incomes are generalizing, and the profits of corporations are high, and vice versa is true. If the economy is doing bad, you find that jobs are not found. You find that the income is low as well. For example, students who entered the job market in the boom of the late of 1990s in the United States, on average, had an easier time finding jobs than did those who entered in the recession of 2008 up to 2009. So given the large effect that the macroeconomics can have on our lives, it is important that we understand how it works. And that's why we begin understanding on what about macroeconomics. After understanding this brief history, actually it is very important now to go deep and understand about wide about these concepts of macroeconomics. in general. In short term, as we observe that macroeconomics deals with the aggregate of the whole economy. It deals with aggregate of the whole economy, issue of national income, the total national income, GDP, the issue of interest rate, the issue of the general inflation we discuss here in macroeconomics. So the key difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics is that macroeconomics deals with the economy as a whole, while microeconomics deals with individual economy. Macroeconomics is concerned with the aggregates or sum, aggregate behavior, that behavior of the whole household and firms together. GDP is an aggregate, so is the national income. Macroeconomics is also concerned with the average, such as average price level, the unemployment rate, and the interest rate. Macroeconomics observe that the important price in the economy often are stick down. When we speak about stick down, we speak about stick prices. These are prices that do not always adjust rapidly to maintain equality between quantity supply and quantity demand. That means that the same price do not seem to always adjust rapidly to maintain equilibrium in the particular market. So real wage is the most notorious example of this. Real wage, this is the kind of wage which is already adjusted with inflation. When there is excess supply in the labor market, the real wages fall very slowly. However, the real wages only stick down. The real wage rise rapidly when there is excess demand for labor. Other markets may also exhibit the stick price caused by the long-term contracts or other institutions arrangements. Since 1970s, much work in the macroeconomics has been concerned with understanding the macroeconomic behavior that causes macroeconomic effects. This is referred to as microeconomics foundations of macroeconomics. For example, labor economists have developed the search theory of unemployment and other information related theories to explain the stick wages. So these are the macroeconomic components. Macroeconomics components deal with what is known as output growth, unemployment, inflation, and deflation. And actual macroeconomic components has resulted due to the Great Depression of that 19th past years. Output growth is the total quantity of goods and services produced in the economy in a given period. Output growth is a good measure of how economy is doing well or bad. So what is produced? We actually refer to as the issue of like the GDP of the country. So what is actually produced may determine if the economy is doing good or is doing bad. In one way or another, the more prosperity economy in the country is to check on indication of what country is producing. Is producing much of the output that's actual enable for the economic growth. So when less is produced, in other words, when the aggregate output decreases, there are few goods and services to go around, and the average standard of living decline. Output also not grow at even rate at all the times. Economics tend to experience a short term up and down in their performance. And this technical name of this up and down is what we refer to as what is known as business cycle. So business cycle, this is the up and downs of the economic fluctuations. So business cycle comprises of four periods or phases. The first one is peak, the second is recession depression, and the third is truth and expansion. At peak, business activities are reached a temporal maximum. So here the economy is near or at full employment, and the level of lead output is at or very close to the economic capacity. So this is actually the economy is starting to improve, going to the potential position. So the price level is like to rise during this phase of peak. So the economy is near or at full employment. What about recession or depression? Contraction of business activities in many sectors of the economy. Along with the decline in real GDP, significant increases in unemployment occur as well. In the truth of the recessions or depressions, output and employment, that's what we call the bottom out at the lowest levels. So the truth phase may be either short-lived or quite long. So you find out depressions, output and employment at the bottom in the recession, in the side of trough. So what about a recession? A recession is usually followed by recovery and expansion, a period in which the real income and employment start to rise. At some point, the economy again approaches to the full employment. So a recession is usually followed by the recovery. So in judging whether an economy is expanding or contracting, note the difference between the level of economic activities and the rate of change. So in judging whether the economy is expanding or contracting, we note out the two effect contraction effect. Let's look on this graph of business cycle showing the ups and down movement of the economy, fluctuation of the economy. We have the peak where the economy is at a potential, at a boom, as observed. We have the recession where the economy starts to decline. And we have the truth point, as you observe, where the employment and output are low. And we have what is known as expansion, where the economy is improving. So point A to point B is growing output, while point B there is a decline of output as well. So the economy is growing at point A to B, and where the output is starting to decline. So unemployment. Unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. So it's a key indicator of the economy health. Because unemployment is usually closely related to the economy aggregate output, announcements of each month's new figures and followed with great interest by economists, politicians, and policymakers. Although macroeconomics are interested in learning why the unemployment rate has risen or fallen in a given period, they try to answer all more basic questions why there is unemployment at all. So in short, unemployment is that people who are able and capable and willing to work cannot find jobs. So we find many of the labor force is not employed. And actual unemployment can indicate the economy if it's doing good or bad. So if unemployment rate is high, the economy is doing bad. When it's low, the economy is doing good. Issue of inflation. Inflation, this is a persistent increase in the price level in the economy. So keep inflation low has long been a goal of the government policy, especially problematic. The hyper, the per inflations or periods of rapid increase in overall price level. So hyperinflations are rare. Nevertheless, economists have devoted much of the effort to identify the cost and the consequences of even moderate inflation. So hyperinflation is excess inflation. Does anyone gain from inflation? Who loses? Who benefits from inflation? What are the costs does inflation impose on societies? This is the actual logical question we may ask ourselves concerned about inflation. How severe our inflation is? What causes inflation? What is the best way to stop it? So there are some main concerns of macroeconomists concerned about questions. A decrease in the overall price level is called a deflation. The goal of the policymakers to avoid prolonged periods of deflation, as well as inflation, in order to pursue macroeconomic goal stability. So you find the key difference between deflation and inflation. A decrease in overall price level is called the deflation. So if the price level decreases more than 50%, we are in the possibility for occurring of what is known as hyperinflation, the excess inflation or the dangerous inflation. Let's come to the components of macroeconomy. These components includes the households, the firms, the government, and the rest of the world. These components actual result demonstrate or determine the circular flow of national income. Therefore, groups interact in the economy and a variety of wage means involving either receiving or paying income. So we find out the household, the firms, the government, the rest of the world interact in the economy, receiving and paying income to each other. So the circular flow of national income tend to show clearly this interaction between these components of macroeconomy. So the circular flow of national income diagram, this is a useful way of see the economic interaction among the four groups, the household, the firms, the government. In the economy, the circular flow diagram which shows the income received and the payments made by each group. So one lesson of the circular flow diagram which show the income received and the payments made by each group. So one lesson of the circular flow diagram is that everyone's expenditure is someone else's receipt. Everyone's expenditure is someone else's receipt. So you may find that the interaction between household, firms, and government, in other words, make a sense to show what are received, payment and received of the income. As you can observe the circular flow of national income. Here you can observe we have the households, we have the firms, we have the government. Household provide labor force to the companies, to the firms, and the firms pay for them. So labor receive the income. As well, when the firms receive the raw materials or input or labor, they produce goods and turn around to the household. So household buy, consume goods and pay for income. So as you can observe, the interactions goes further for the interaction of government, interaction for household and firms in this circular flow of national income. You see the other worlds, they're interacting due to the selling, exportation and importations of commodities by the governments, by the firms in the household, as you can observe. So this interaction show out the receipts and payments between these components of macroeconomics, household, firms and government, together with the other worlds. So these interactions, as you can observe, enable to see that the three macroeconomic components interacting to each other. So the three market arena we are discussing now, another way of looking at the ways households, firms and government and the rest of the world relate to one another is to consider the market in which they interact. We divide the markets in the three broad arenas. We have goods and services market, second we have the labor market, and we have what is known as money or financial market. Goods and services markets, these households and the government purchase goods and services for the firms in the goods and services market. In this market, firms also purchase goods and services from each other. So firms supply to the goods and services market, household, the government, and firms demand from this market. Finally, the rest of the world buys from the sales, the goods and services market. So in this market, firms also purchase goods and services from each other. So firms supply to the goods and services market, household, the government, and firms demand from this market. Finally, the rest of the world buys from the sales to the goods and services market. So this is the actual goods and services market that we see the interaction for the purchases of different goods and services between the three components of macroeconomy, that's household and the other worlds, together with governance. But also we have the second one, interaction, that is the labor market. This is another market arena. It takes place when the firms and the government purchase labor from households. In this market, households supply labor, and firms and the government demand labor. Labor is also supplied to and demanded from the rest of the world. In recent years, the labor market has become an international market. So this kind of market arena takes place when firms and government purchase labor from households in the market. Households supply labor and firms demand for labor. Another kind of market arena is the money market. Sometimes we call the financial market also. In this type of market arena, households purchase stocks and bonds from firms. So households supply funds to this market in the expectations of any income in form of dividends on stocks and interest on bonds. So household also demand or borrows funds from this market to finance various purchases. So firms borrows to build the new facilities, and the government borrow to issue bonds. Let's come to another concept, that the role of government in the macroeconomy. The government plays a major role in the macroeconomy, so a useful way of learning how the macroeconomics works is to consider how the government uses policy to affect the economy. So there are two main policies that are applied. We have the fiscal policy and monetary policy. And after these were the key ideas that was proposed by Keynes at that times of Great Depression. So much of the study of macroeconomics is learning on how fiscal and monetary policy works. So fiscal policy tends to establish, to use, to apply the two tools, that is tax rate together with government spending. So fiscal policy is where government policies concern taxes and spending. An expansion fiscal policy is a policy in which the taxes are cut and the government spending increases. So you may apply contraction or fiscal policies to control the economy. It depends on the situation of the economy. If there is inflation, we could apply what is known as contraction fiscal policy. And if there is what is known as depression, low income level, we could apply what is known as expansion of fiscal policy to boost up the economy. So this method, these tools may be applied depending on the condition of the economy. The main purpose to apply this is to bring the macroeconomic stability of the economy. And these were ideas that were proposed by Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. Monetary policies, central bank policies, this aim at controlling the quantity of money, which in turn affect the interest rates. The tools that are applied in monetary policy include the interest rate, reserve ratio, discount rate, buying and selling of securities as well. So these tools may apply in vice versa, in the opposite way. May be applied in a positive or negative way, depends on the situation of the economy. If there is inflation, monetary policy can also be applied to stabilize the economy. So monetary expansion or contraction fiscal policy may be applied to bring out the macroeconomic stability of the economy. Thank you, and I welcome you to another session. Bye bye. Don't forget to subscribe. This is DC Economics. Welcome and watch other videos. Bye bye.
Be the first to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be the first to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.